The sun blazed over Miami's design district, casting a golden glow on the sleek glass facade of Elite Motor Gallery. Inside, $900,000 Rolls-Royce boat tails gleamed under spotlights, their curves whispering wealth and prestige. John Thompson, 70, adjusted his worn but neatly pressed blazer, his eyes sparkling with anticipation. Beside him, Mary Thompson, 68, smoothed her simple floral dress, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Today was special, their 50th wedding anniversary, and they'd come to fulfill a quiet dream, to see, maybe even touch, the kind of car they'd only seen in magazines during their decades of hard work as a teacher and a nurse. "Can you believe it, Mary?" John said warmly, his voice low as he gazed at a sapphire blue boat tail. 50 years, and here we are, finally looking at one of these beauties. Mary squeezed his arm, her smile radiant despite the lines etched by years of resilience. "We made it, John. Through everything, Jim Crow, redlining, all of it. This is our moment." Her words carried a quiet pride, a nod to the battles they'd fought as a black couple in a world that hadn't always been kind. But the moment shattered as Eric Larson, a 40-year-old sales associate with a slick suit and a sharper smirk, approached. His eyes flicked over John's faded blazer and Mary's modest dress, his lip curling slightly. "Folks," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "these cars start at $900,000. Maybe you'd be more comfortable at the used lot down on Biscayne Boulevard." John's jaw tightened, but he kept his tone steady. "We're here to look at the boat tail, son. It's a special day for us." Eric's smirk widened, his voice louder now, drawing glances from other customers. "Special day or not, this isn't a museum. If you can't afford it, you're wasting my time." He gestured toward a corner of the showroom where cheaper sedans sat, his eyes glinting with malice. "Let me show you something more. Your speed." Mary's hand trembled on John's arm, her voice soft but firm. "We know what we came for, young man. We're not here to be judged." Eric's laugh was sharp, cutting through the showroom's polished air. "Judged? Lady, I'm just being realistic." He stepped closer, deliberately steering them toward the budget section, his movements calculated to humiliate. A few customers, a well-dressed woman in designer heels, a man in a polo shirt, exchanged smirks, their whispers like needles. "They don't belong here," the woman muttered, loud enough for Mary to hear. In the background, Sarah Jenkins, a 30-year-old junior saleswoman, hovered near a display, her fingers nervously twisting a pen. Her dark eyes darted between Eric and the Thompsons, her lips pressed tight. She'd seen Eric's arrogance before, but this felt different, crueler. Her parents, immigrants who'd faced their own share of sneers, flashed in her mind. She wanted to speak up, to say something, but fear of Eric's wrath kept her silent. She glanced at Tom Rivera, a 35-year-old mechanic, wiping his hands on a rag in the corner. Tom's brow furrowed as he overheard Eric's words, his jaw set in quiet disapproval. He caught Sarah's eye, shaking his head slightly, as if to say, "This isn't right." John stood taller, his voice calm but edged with steel. "We've earned the right to be here, same as anyone. You don't know our story." Eric scoffed, crossing his arms. "Story? Save it. This is Elite Motor Gallery, not a charity case." He turned, gesturing dismissively toward the exit. "Maybe try the Kia lot on 8th Street." Mary's eyes glistened, but she lifted her chin, her voice steady despite the hurt. "John, let's go. This place doesn't deserve us." She clutched his arm tighter, her dignity a shield against the sneers. John nodded, his gaze lingering on the boat tail, a dream now tainted by cruelty. As they moved toward the door, Sarah took a hesitant step forward, her heart pounding. "Wait," she whispered, but her voice was lost in the showroom's hum. Tom, still watching, muttered under his breath, "Eric's gonna regret this." Outside, the Miami sun beat down on the design district's trendy streets, where influencers snapped photos and luxury cars purred by. John and Mary paused by their modest sedan, their hands clasped. "We didn't come this far to let someone like him take our joy," John said softly, his eyes meeting Mary's. She nodded, her voice resolute. "We'll be back, John, and they'll see who we are." Their words hung in the air, a promise of resilience forged through decades of facing down prejudice. Back inside, Eric smirked, oblivious to the storm he'd ignited. Sarah, still clutching her pen, felt a spark of courage flicker within her. Tom, wiping his hands, knew something had to change. The Thompsons' dream, tarnished but unbroken, was about to spark a reckoning that would shake Elite Motor Gallery to its core. The polished marble floors of Elite Motor Gallery gleamed under the Miami sun, reflecting the glint of a $900,000 Rolls-Royce boat tail in the center of the showroom. The air buzzed with the low hum of wealth, customers in designer clothes murmuring, sales staff flitting between displays. But for John and Mary Thompson, the dream of their 50th anniversary visit had soured. Eric Larson's mocking words still echoed in their ears, his suggestion that they belonged at a used lot cutting deeper than they'd let on. John, 70, stood rigid, his hands steadying Mary, 68, whose floral dress seemed to shrink under the weight of the showroom stairs. Eric, his slick suit creased with arrogance, wasn't done. He stepped closer, his voice rising deliberately to carry across the showroom. "Look, folks, I'm doing you a favor," he said, smirking coldly. "This place is for serious buyers. Why don't you head out before you waste more of our time?" Mary's fingers tightened on John's arm, her eyes flashing with hurt but holding steady. "We're not leaving," she said softly, her voice laced with defiance. "We came to see the boat tail, and we're staying until we do." Eric laughed, a sharp bark that drew chuckles from nearby customers. Among them, Claire Donovan, a 45-year-old regular draped in a Chanel scarf, tilted her head with a sneer. "Some people don't know their place," she said loudly, her voice dripping with disdain as she sipped a latte. "This isn't a charity showroom." Her words sparked murmurs of agreement from a cluster of onlookers, their whispers like a rising tide against the Thompsons. Sarah Jenkins, the junior saleswoman, stood frozen near a display of car keys, her heart pounding. At 30, she'd seen Eric's arrogance before, but this was different, vicious, personal. Her parents' struggles as immigrants in Miami flickered in her mind. The way they'd been dismissed in stores, just like this. She gripped her clipboard, her knuckles whitening, wanting to intervene, but paralyzed by the fear of losing her job. She glanced at Tom Rivera, the 35-year-old mechanic, wiping grease from his hands in the corner. Tom's dark eyes narrowed as he watched Eric, his jaw tight with disgust. "This is bull," he muttered to Sarah, his voice low but firm. "He's crossing a line." Eric, sensing the room's attention, saw an opportunity to push further. He grabbed a coffee cup from a nearby table, sauntering toward the Thompsons with feigned carelessness. "Oops," he said, his tone mocking as he tilted the cup, letting coffee splash onto the marble floor just inches from Mary's shoes. "Better watch your step," he added, his eyes gleaming with malice, hoping to force them out in embarrassment. Mary, with a grace honed by decades of facing cruelty, stepped aside calmly, her gaze never leaving Eric's. "You missed," she said evenly, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. John's hand squeezed hers, his face a mask of restrained anger. "You're not running us off," he said, his tone low but resolute. "Not today." The room grew quieter, the laughter fading as some customers shifted uncomfortably. A young couple, Mia and Jake, exchanged glances near a display. Mia's brow furrowed, her voice barely audible. "This isn't right," she whispered to Jake, who nodded but stayed silent, his eyes darting nervously to Eric. Claire, however, leaned closer to another customer, her voice sharp. "They're making a scene. Why don't they just go?" Sarah's chest tightened, her guilt mounting. She took a shaky step forward, her voice barely a whisper. "Eric, maybe." But he cut her off with a glare, his eyes daring her to challenge him. "Stay out of it, Jenkins," he snapped, his tone icy. "You want to keep your commission?" Tom, still in the corner, shook his head, his hands balling into fists. "He's going to regret this," he muttered to himself, his voice thick with frustration. He caught Sarah's eye, nodding slightly as if urging her to act. Sarah's heart raced, her mind torn between fear and the growing fire of her conscience. John and Mary stood their ground, their clasped hands a quiet rebellion against the hostility. "We've faced worse than you," John said, his voice steady but heavy with memory. "And we're still here." His words carried the weight of their past. Decades of slights, from segregated schools to denied loans, each overcome with unwavering dignity. Eric scoffed, turning away with a dismissive wave. "Suit yourselves," he said, his voice loud enough for the room to hear. "But you're not touching that car." He strode back to his desk, leaving the Thompsons in a sea of judgmental stares. As the couple moved toward the exit, their steps slow but deliberate, the showroom's hum resumed, but it felt hollow. Sarah watched them go, her throat tight with shame. Tom leaned closer, his voice urgent. "You saw that, Sarah. You gonna let him get away with it?" Outside, the design district's vibrant streets buzzed with life, but for John and Mary, the sting of humiliation lingered. Yet, in their shared glance, there was a spark of resolve. This wasn't over. Back in the showroom, Sarah's fingers trembled on her clipboard, her mind racing. Something had to change, and she was starting to feel it might begin with her. The hum of Elite Motor Gallery's showroom felt suffocating. The polished marble floors and glittering Rolls-Royce boat tails, now a backdrop to the lingering sting of Eric Larson's cruelty. John and Mary Thompson stood near the exit, their hands clasped, their dignity a quiet fortress against the sneers that had chased them across the Miami Design District showroom. The crowd's whispers, led by Claire Donovan's cutting remarks, still echoed, but a shift was brewing in a quieter corner where a sapphire blue boat tail gleamed under soft lights. Sarah Jenkins, 30, stood frozen, her clipboard trembling in her hands. The junior saleswoman's heart raced as she replayed Eric's vicious words to John and Mary, his coffee-spilling stunt still fresh in her mind. Her parents' faces flashed before her, immigrants who'd faced slammed doors and cold stares in Miami's markets decades ago. "You don't belong," they'd been told, just like the Thompsons now. Sarah's throat tightened, guilt and anger warring within her. She'd stayed silent too long. Across the showroom, Tom Rivera, the 35-year-old mechanic, leaned against a wall, his grease-stained hands clenched. He'd seen Eric's antics before, but this was personal, a deliberate attack on an elderly couple's joy. Catching Sarah's eye, he nodded subtly, his voice low but urgent. "You gonna do something, Sarah?" he whispered, his tone both a challenge and a plea. "They don't deserve this." Sarah took a shaky breath, her resolve hardening. She stepped toward John and Mary, her voice soft but steady. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," she said warmly, ignoring the knot in her stomach. "I'd love to show you the boat tail. It's a special car for a special day, right?" John's eyes, clouded with hurt, softened slightly. "You sure about that, miss?" he asked cautiously, his voice carrying the weight of their ordeal. "Didn't seem like we were welcome here." Mary's gaze met Sarah's, searching. "We just wanted to see it," she said quietly, her tone laced with hope. "It's our 50th anniversary." Sarah's heart ached, her parents' struggles echoing in Mary's words. "You're more than welcome," she said firmly, her voice gaining strength. "Follow me." She led them to the boat tail, its sleek curves gleaming like a promise. As she opened the driver's door, she gestured invitingly. "Go ahead, Mr. Thompson. Sit in it. Feel it." John hesitated, then slid into the leather seat, his hands brushing the steering wheel with reverence. "Smooth as silk," he murmured, a faint smile breaking through. Mary leaned in, her eyes brightening. "It's beautiful, John," she said softly, her voice catching. "Like we always dreamed." Sarah knelt beside them, her tone earnest as she explained the car's features. "This model's got a V12 engine, 563 horsepower, and a custom champagne cooler in the back. Perfect for celebrating." Her enthusiasm was genuine, a stark contrast to the showroom's earlier hostility. Mary chuckled, her hand resting on John's shoulder. "Champagne cooler? We might need that for our next 50 years, she said playfully, her warmth drawing a grin from Sarah. But the moment was short-lived. Eric, spotting Sarah from across the showroom, narrowed his eyes. His plan to humiliate the Thompsons was unraveling, and he wasn't about to let a junior saleswoman upstage him. He strode over, clutching a tablet, his voice sharp. "Jenkins, I need you to handle a client file in the back, now," he barked, his tone laced with menace. "This isn't your sale." Sarah's pulse spiked, but she stood her ground, her voice calm but defiant. "I'm helping these customers, Eric. They deserve it." Her words hung in the air, a quiet rebellion that made Eric's jaw tighten. Tom, watching from the sidelines, saw his chance. He stepped forward, wiping his hands on his rag, his tone casual but pointed. "Hey, Eric, got a question about the engine specs on that Bentley over there?" he said loudly, drawing Eric's attention. Eric glared, but couldn't resist the bait, storming off with a muttered curse. Tom shot Sarah a quick wink, his subtle rebellion giving her the space she needed. Sarah turned back to the Thompsons, her voice softer now. "My parents came from Cuba," she said hesitantly, her eyes meeting Mary's. "They used to tell me about being turned away from places like this. I couldn't let that happen to you." Mary's face softened, her hand reaching out to touch Sarah's. "You're a good soul," she said warmly, her voice thick with emotion. "My mama faced the same thing in Alabama years ago. She'd be proud of you." John nodded, his voice steady but grateful. "Thank you, miss. You've given us back a piece of our day." The exchange was brief but powerful, a bridge of shared resilience forming between them. But the showroom's tension lingered, Claire Donovan's disapproving stare cutting through the crowd, Eric's absence only temporary. Sarah felt a spark of courage ignite, knowing she'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. As John and Mary stepped out of the car, their smiles fragile but real, Sarah knew this moment was just the beginning. Outside, the Miami Design District pulsed with life, oblivious to the quiet victory inside. John and Mary walked to their sedan, their hands still clasped, their resolve unbroken. Sarah watched them go, her heart swelling with purpose. Tom, lingering nearby, murmured, "You did good, Sarah, but Eric's not gonna let this slide." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting Coconut Grove's quiet streets with hues of orange and pink. Inside John and Mary Thompson's modest home, the warmth of their 50-year marriage filled the air, despite the day's wounds. Family photos lined the walls, John in his teacher's cap and gown, Mary in her nurse's uniform, their son David as a boy with a gap-toothed grin. The couple sat at their worn oak dining table, the weight of their visit to Elite Motor Gallery heavy in the silence. John, 70, stirred his coffee slowly, his brow furrowed. Mary, 68, clasped her hands, her floral dress now replaced by a cozy sweater, her eyes distant but resolute. The front door opened, and David Thompson, 45, strode in, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the home's simplicity. His wife, Lisa, 43, followed, her elegant blouse softened by a concerned smile. "Mama, Pops," David said warmly, leaning to kiss Mary's cheek. "Sorry we're late. Traffic on Dixie Highway was a mess." Lisa set a tray of homemade cornbread on the table, her voice gentle. "You okay, Mama? You sounded off on the phone." She sat beside Mary, her hand resting lightly on her mother-in-law's arm. Mary sighed, her voice soft but steady. "It was supposed to be a special day, Lisa. Our 50th anniversary. We went to see a Rolls-Royce at that fancy dealership in the design district." John's jaw tightened, his spoon clinking against the mug. "Elite Motor Gallery," he said gruffly, his tone laced with hurt. "Thought we'd treat ourselves, you know, just to look. But this salesman, Eric something, treated us like dirt." David's eyes narrowed, his voice sharp. "What do you mean, treated you like dirt?" He leaned forward, his tech CEO confidence giving way to protective anger. Mary's fingers trembled slightly, but she met David's gaze. "He said we couldn't afford it, David," she said quietly, her words heavy with the sting of memory. "Told us to go to a used car lot. Then he got loud, made a scene. Folks laughed, whispered we didn't belong." John nodded, his voice low but firm. "He even tried to spill coffee on your mama, thinking it'd make us run off." She didn't flinch, though. He reached for Mary's hand, his pride in her evident. "And there was this one girl, Sarah, she was kind. Showed us the car anyway. But the rest, pure ugliness." Lisa's eyes glistened, her voice tight with outrage. "That's disgusting. You didn't deserve that. Not on your anniversary." She squeezed Mary's hand, her marketing executive poise cracking under the weight of her family's pain. David stood, pacing the small dining room, his fists clenched. "They humiliated you because of how you look. Because you're black?" His voice rose, thick with fury. "I've heard enough. Nobody does that to my parents. Nobody." Mary's voice softened, her tone cautionary. "David, don't let anger make you forget who you are. We've always taught you to rise above." David stopped, his eyes locking on his parents. "I know, Mama, but rising above doesn't mean letting this slide. You taught me to fight for what's right." He turned to Lisa, his voice resolute. "I'm going back to that dealership. They're gonna learn who you are." Lisa nodded, her tone supportive but measured. "I'm with you, David, but let's be smart about it. We need a plan, not just a scene." She glanced at John and Mary, her voice softening. "You two are the strongest people I know. David's got your fire." John's gaze drifted to a framed photo of David at his college graduation, a moment built on their sacrifices. "You remember when we couldn't afford your books, son?" he said quietly, his voice thick with memory. "We worked double shifts, scraped by. You made it to the top because we never let folks like that salesman stop us." Meanwhile, miles away in the design district, Eric Larson sat at his desk in Elite Motor Gallery's now empty showroom, the glow of his computer screen casting shadows. His smirk hadn't faded. Typing quickly, he sent a taunting email to the dealership's general inbox, unaware it would be seen by management later. "Had to chase out some wannabes today," he wrote, his words dripping with malice. "Thought they could window shop a boat tail. Laughable." He hit send, oblivious to the storm he was stoking. The Miami skyline glittered against the dawn, its glass towers reflecting the calm waters of Biscayne Bay. On the 30th floor of a sleek downtown office building, David Thompson, 45, stood at a floor-to-ceiling window, his tailored suit crisp, but his eyes stormy. His tech empire had earned him this view, but today his focus was personal, a burning need to right the wrong done to his parents, John and Mary Thompson, at Elite Motor Gallery. The memory of their humiliation, recounted over cornbread in their Coconut Grove home, fueled his resolve. He clenched his jaw, torn between the fiery anger of a son and the dignity his parents had instilled in him. Rachel Kim, 38, David's sharp-witted lawyer, sat at a glass conference table, her laptop open and her expression focused. Her neatly pressed blazer and quick glances betrayed her readiness for battle. "David, I've got a plan," she said confidently, tapping her pen against a legal pad. "We hit Elite Motor Gallery where it hurts, their reputation. We go back, make a statement, and demand accountability." David's grin faded, his voice softening. "Mama told me to do this with dignity, Rachel. I want to honor that. But every time I think of Pops sitting in that car, finally smiling, and that jerk trying to ruin it," he trailed off, his fists tapping the table. "I want justice, not just a scene." Rachel leaned forward, her tone reassuring. "We'll get justice, David. The footage, your presence, and the truth, that's our leverage. I'll draft a formal request for the video today. You focus on your parents. They're the heart of this." David nodded, his gaze drifting to a framed photo on his desk, John and Mary at his college graduation. Their proud smiles a testament to their sacrifices. "They always taught me to stand tall," he said quietly, his voice thick with memory. "When I was a kid in Overtown, we didn't have much. Pops worked nights, Mama took extra shifts. They got me here." He tapped the photo, his resolve hardening. "This is for them." Meanwhile, across town in the Design District, Elite Motor Gallery buzzed with morning preparations. Eric Larson, oblivious to the Thompsons' connection to David, strutted through the showroom, his ego unchecked. A memo about a VIP visit had landed on his desk, and his smirk grew. "Some hotshot coming in today," he muttered to a colleague, his voice dripping with disdain. "Let's make it quick." To ensure the staff looked unprepared, he slipped key spec sheets for the boat tails into a drawer, locking it with a sly grin. "Good luck without these," he chuckled, hoping to embarrass his team and maintain his control. But Sarah Jenkins, tidying a nearby display, noticed his sleight of hand, her brow furrowed, her newfound courage stirring. She retrieved the specs quietly, tucking them into her clipboard, her heart racing with defiance. Back in David's office, Rachel closed her laptop, her voice brisk. "I'll call the dealership, set up the visit. We go tomorrow, midday, when it's packed. Maximum impact." David stood, his posture straightening. "Tomorrow then," he said firmly, his voice carrying a quiet fire. "I'm calling Mama and Pops tonight. They need to know we're doing this together." He paused, his expression softening. "And that young woman, Sarah, she helped them. We make sure she's protected too." Rachel smiled, her tone approving. "Got it. Sarah's an asset. If she's willing, she could corroborate what happened. Let's move fast." As Rachel gathered her notes, David looked out over Biscayne Bay, the water shimmering with possibility. His parents' teachings, dignity, resilience, justice, pulsed in his veins. The plan was set, the stage prepared. Elite Motor Gallery was about to face a reckoning, and David was ready to lead it with the strength his family had forged. The Miami Design District pulsed with midday energy, its trendy streets alive with influencers snapping photos and luxury cars purring past. Elite Motor Gallery's glass facade gleamed under the Florida sun, its showroom packed with customers admiring $900,000 Rolls-Royce boat tails. Inside, Eric Larson, 40, adjusted his tie, his smirk firmly in place despite the buzz about a VIP visit. He'd hidden key car specs to sabotage the staff's presentation, unaware that Sarah Jenkins, 30, had thwarted his plan by retrieving them. His arrogance blinded him to the storm about to break. John nodded, his tone steady but laced with defiance. "Sure do, son. Last time, we didn't get a proper look." He squeezed Mary's hand, his eyes never leaving Eric's. Mary's smile was serene, her voice warm but pointed. We're celebrating 50 years, you see. Thought we'd try again, properly this time. Her words, gentle yet cutting, silenced the room, the weight of their previous ordeal hanging heavy. Howard Brooks, 50, the dealership manager, emerged from his office, his face a mask of forced calm. His rumpled suit and nervous glance betrayed his unease. "Mr. Thompson, welcome," he said, hesitantly, his voice cracking. "We're honored to have you." He shot Eric a look, sensing trouble, but unsure of its scope. Eric, desperate to regain control, leaned toward a colleague, his voice a harsh whisper. "This guy's probably a fraud. Bet he rented those cars." His rumor spread quickly, a few staff nodding skeptically, but Tom overheard, his jaw tightening. He slipped over to Sarah, his voice urgent. "Eric's talking trash about the Thompsons. We gotta shut that down." Sarah nodded, her courage from the previous day reigniting. "I've got the specs he hid," she whispered, clutching her clipboard. "I'll make sure this goes right." She stepped forward, her voice clear. "Mr. Thompson, I'd be happy to show you the Boat Tales features." Her eyes met David's, a silent promise of support. David's nod was subtle, his voice firm. "Thank you, Sarah. My parents deserve the best." He turned to Howard, his tone unwavering. "And we'll need to see your security footage from yesterday. There's some behavior we need to address." Howard's face twitched, his voice faltering. "Footage? I'd need to check with corporate." He glanced at Eric, whose hands shook as he fumbled with his phone, his bravado crumbling. The crowd buzzed, phones still recording. Claire, now pale, whispered to a friend, "Did they say security footage? What happened here?" A young couple, Mia and Jake, who'd felt sympathy before, exchanged glances, their voices low. "This is big," Mia said softly, her eyes fixed on the Thompsons. John and Mary stood tall, their hands clasped, their presence a quiet rebuke to the showroom's earlier hostility. John's voice was steady, his words deliberate. "We came back because we belong here, same as anyone. No one gets to take that from us." Mary's eyes glistened, her voice soft but resolute. "And we're not alone this time." She glanced at David, her pride in her son a beacon in the tense room. David's gaze swept the showroom, his voice commanding, "This isn't just about a car, it's about respect, and we're not leaving until we get it." His words landed like a challenge, the air crackling with anticipation. Eric's knees buckled slightly, his whisper to himself barely audible, "I'm screwed." Sarah, standing firm, felt a surge of purpose. Tom, watching from the sidelines, nodded in approval. Howard, sweating now, knew the situation was slipping beyond his control. Outside, the design district's vibrant chaos continued, but inside Elite Motor Gallery, a reckoning was unfolding. The Thompsons' return, bold and unapologetic, had set the stage for truth to surface, and no one, not Eric, not Howard, could stop it. Howard's eyes darted nervously. I need to clear that with corporate," he stammered, his voice weak. "It's not that simple." Rachel stepped forward, her tone crisp. "It's very simple. You have cameras. We have a right to see what they recorded. Unless you're hiding something?" Her words, laced with challenge, made Howard's face redden. Mary's eyes met Howard's, her voice soft but piercing. "A man in your employ made us feel like we didn't belong. We deserve the truth." Her dignity, unshaken by Eric's cruelty, filled the room. Eric, sensing the noose tightening, lunged for the laptop, his voice frantic. "Let me pull it up." His fingers fumbled, not to retrieve the footage, but to delete it. Rachel's eyes narrowed, her reflexes sharp. She slid the laptop away, her tone icy. "Nice try, Eric. We're watching." Howard, now cornered, nodded reluctantly. "Fine, play it." He gestured to a technician who cued the footage on a large monitor. The screen flickered, revealing the showroom from the previous day. John and Mary appeared, their faces alight with excitement, only to be met by Eric's sneer. His voice boomed through the speakers. "These cars start at $900,000. Maybe you'd be more comfortable at the used lot on Biscayne." Sarah Jenkins, 30, stood near the door, her heart pounding. The footage validated her courage from yesterday, but seeing Eric's cruelty replayed made her stomach churn. Tom Rivera, 35, beside her, clenched his fists, his voice low. "That's exactly how it went down. He's done." Eric's face crumpled, his voice desperate. "It's not what it looks like. I was just joking, you know? Customer service can be tough." His excuses faltered as the footage showed him steering the Thompsons to the budget section, his smirk unmistakable. David's jaw tightened, his voice low but searing. "You call that a joke? You targeted my parents because of their skin. You shamed them in front of everyone." He turned to Howard, his tone unrelenting. "This is your dealership. What are you going to do about it?" Howard's shoulders slumped, his voice barely audible. I didn't know it was this bad." He glanced at Eric, his tone hardening. "You've got no excuse, Larson." Claire, watching from the crowd, clutched her purse, her face pale with shame. "I didn't mean," she whispered, her earlier complicity now a weight. The young couple, Mia and Jake, nodded solemnly, Mia's voice soft. "They deserve better than this." Other staff reactions varied. Some looked ashamed, their heads bowed. Others crossed their arms, defensive murmurs rippling through. Tom stepped forward, his voice clear. "I saw it all, Mr. Brooks. Eric's been like this for months. He picks on anyone he thinks doesn't fit. The Thompsons aren't the first." His testimony, grounded in quiet principle, sealed Eric's fate. Sarah, emboldened, added softly, "I tried to help them yesterday, but Eric stopped me. He wanted them gone." Her words, though hesitant, carried the weight of truth, her courage shining through. John's eyes glistened, his voice steady. "We've faced this kind of hate before, but we're still here, standing tall." He squeezed Mary's hand, their resilience a beacon. The monitor went dark, the footage ending. David turned to Howard, his voice resolute. "You've seen the truth. Act like it." Eric's knees buckled, his voice a whine. "You can't do this. I was just doing my job." But the room's silence answered him, his shame laid bare. The polished marble floors of Elite Motor Gallery's showroom reflected the tension in the air. The crowd's murmurs hushed after the security footage laid bare Eric Larson's prejudice. John Thompson, 70, and Mary, 68, stood with their son David, 45, their dignity a quiet force amidst the gleaming Rolls-Royce boat tails. The private office door swung open, and Howard Brooks, 50, the dealership manager, stepped out, his face grim but resolute. Eric, 40, trailed behind, his eyes darting, his earlier arrogance shattered by the public shaming. Howard cleared his throat, his voice unsteady but firm. "Effective immediately, Eric Larson is no longer employed at Elite Motor Gallery." The words landed like a gavel, drawing gasps from the crowd. "We have a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. What happened to Mr. and Mrs. Thompson was unacceptable." Eric's face twisted, his voice a desperate rasp. "You're making a mistake, Howard." "I was just doing my job." His protest drew skeptical glances, the crowd's phones still recording. John nodded, his voice steady. "We've faced this kind of hate before, but it shouldn't happen in a place like this. Fix it, Mr. Brooks." Mary's gaze was calm but piercing. "It's not just about us. It's about every person who walks through that door." Her words, soft yet powerful, silenced the room. Howard swallowed hard, his voice earnest. You're right, Mrs. Thompson. We'll implement mandatory diversity training starting next week. I'm sorry for all of this. His apology, though belated, marked a shift from his earlier apathy. Sarah Jenkins, 30, felt a spark of hope, her clipboard clutched tightly. Eric's firing validated her courage, and Howard's promise fueled her resolve to push for change. Tom Rivera, 35, standing nearby, gave her a subtle nod, his voice low. "This is big, Sarah. You helped make it happen." The crowd's reactions varied. Claire Donovan, 45, hung her head, her earlier complicity now a source of shame. The young couple, Mia and Jake, whispered their approval, Mia's voice soft. About time they did something. But not all were convinced. A few staff members exchanged defensive glances, their murmurs hinting at resistance. David stood his ground, his voice calm but firm. "You trashed yourself, Eric. You chose hate over respect." David turned to his parents, his voice warm. "Mama, Pops, you stood tall through this. I'm proud to be your son." He faced Howard, his tone insistent. "Those policies better stick, Brooks. I'll be watching." Mary smiled, her eyes glistening. "And that young woman, Sarah, she's got heart. This is her victory, too." The showroom, once a battleground of prejudice, felt lighter, the weight of Eric's actions lifting. Claire approached hesitantly, her voice low. "I was wrong to judge you, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. I'm sorry." Her apology, though awkward, was a step toward growth. The elite motor gallery showroom, once a battleground of prejudice, now glowed with a newfound warmth, the polished Rolls-Royce boat tails framing a moment of triumph. The crowd, still buzzing from Eric Larson's firing and Howard Brooks's pledge for reform, gathered in a loose semicircle, their phones lowered as a sense of unity took hold. David Thompson, 45, stood at the center, his tailored suit a symbol of his resolve, his parents, John, 70, and Mary, 68, by his side, their hands clasped, their faces radiant with quiet pride. Sarah Jenkins, 30, lingered near a display, her clipboard forgotten, her heart racing with unexpected anticipation. John's eyes glistened, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "We've been through a lot, son, but standing here with you, with all these folks watching, it's more than we dreamed." He squeezed Mary's hand, his smile a testament to their enduring bond. Mary's gaze swept the room, her voice gentle but powerful. "We came to see a car, but we found something bigger. People who care. That's what makes this day special." Her words, simple yet profound, drew nods from the crowd, their earlier tension replaced by admiration. Lisa Thompson, 43, stood beside Mary, her hand resting lightly on her mother-in-law's shoulder. Her voice soft. "You're the heart of this family, Mama. You always have been." Her marketing executive poise gave way to raw affection, her eyes shining as she looked at John and Mary. David turned to Sarah, his expression earnest. "And then there's Sarah Jenkins. When everyone else turned away, you stepped up. You gave my parents dignity when it was stolen from them." He pulled a framed certificate from his briefcase, its gold lettering gleaming. "On behalf of my family, I'm presenting you with this commendation for compassion and courage." Sarah's breath caught, her eyes widening as she stepped forward, her voice trembling. I don't know what to say, Mr. Thompson. I just did what felt right." Her cheeks flushed, but her smile was radiant as she accepted the certificate, her parents' struggles echoing in her heart. The crowd erupted in applause, the sound filling the showroom with a wave of support. Tom Rivera, 35, clapped loudly, his voice booming. "That's our Sarah." His grin, usually reserved, was wide, his pride in his colleague unmistakable. Mary leaned into him, her voice tender. "And today, John, We got to share that with the world. That's our anniversary gift. Their shared glance, filled with love and resilience, was a moment of pure connection, untouched by the pain of the previous day. David watched his parents, his voice thick with pride. "You taught me what strength looks like. This," he gestured to the crowd, the certificate, the showroom. "This is because of you." Sarah clutched her commendation, her eyes meeting Mary's. "Mrs. Thompson, you said I was a good soul. But you and Mr. Thompson, you're the ones who inspired me." Her voice cracked, her gratitude raw. The bond forged in their shared stand against prejudice, now unbreakable. Lisa hugged Mary tightly, her voice a whisper. "We're celebrating you today, Mama, and every day." Her warmth anchored the moment, her role as family glue evident in her quiet strength. The crowd's applause faded, but the energy lingered, a collective exhale after days of tension. Phones captured the scene, ready to spread the Thompsons' triumph and Sarah's courage across Miami and beyond. Howard, now a reluctant ally, felt the weight of his new responsibility. Tom, ever steadfast, knew the fight for change was just beginning. As the showroom settled, the Thompsons and Sarah stood together, their victory a beacon of hope. The Miami Design District's vibrancy pulsed outside, but inside, this moment, rooted in dignity, compassion, and justice, was a celebration that would echo far beyond the gleaming cars. The Miami Design District's vibrant streets pulsed with life, its art galleries and luxury boutiques a backdrop to a story that had ignited the city. Days after the Thompsons' triumph at Elite Motor Gallery, the tale of John, 70, and Mary Thompson, 68, and Sarah Jenkins' courage had exploded online, fueled by Rachel Kinn's strategic push to WPLG Local 10. Clips of David Thompson's confrontation, Sarah's commendation, and the dealership's reform flooded social media. Hashtags like Justice for Thompsons and hashtag Stand with Sarah trending across platforms. In Coconut Grove, John and Mary sat on their porch, their modest home now a quiet hub of pride, watching their story ripple outward. At WPLG's sleek studio, anchor Nicole Perez leaned into the camera, her voice warm but urgent. A black couple's 50th anniversary turned into a fight for justice at a Miami dealership, thanks to their son, tech CEO David Thompson, and a compassionate saleswoman, Sarah Jenkins. The segment flashed footage of the Thompsons' arrival in Rolls-Royce boat tails, David's speech honoring his parents, and Sarah clutching her certificate, her eyes bright with emotion. "This is a story of dignity," Perez concluded, "and a reminder to stand against prejudice." Social media erupted. A tweet from @MiamiVibes read, "The Thompsons showed us what grace under fire looks like. Hashtag Justice for Thompsons." Another, from @SoBeActivist, praised Sarah. "Shout out to Sarah Jenkins for stepping up when it counted. Allyship in action. Stand with Sarah." A viral post on X captured John and Mary's clasped hands, captioned, "50 years of love, stronger than hate." Comments poured in, from "This is why we fight for equality" to "David's a hero for his parents." Some voices, though, resisted, with one user grumbling, "Just a publicity stunt." But they were drowned out by the swell of support. In downtown Miami, a community center buzzed with anticipation for a unity event organized by Rachel Kim, 38. The room, adorned with banners reading "Respect for All," filled with locals, activists, and familiar faces from the dealership saga. David, 45, stood at a podium, his suit sharp, his expression resolute. John and Mary sat in the front row, their faces glowing with quiet pride. Lisa Thompson, 43, squeezed Mary's hand, her voice soft. "You started this, Mama. Look at all these people." The crowd nodded, their applause building. Sarah, 30, sat near Tom Rivera, 35, her commendation framed at home, but its weight still on her heart. She whispered to Tom, her voice trembling, I never thought I'd be part of something this big. Tom grinned, his voice low. You earned it, Sarah. We all did. Claire Donovan, 45, stood at the back, her earlier complicity now a distant shame. She approached Mary after the speech, her voice hesitant. Mrs. Thompson, I was wrong that day at the dealership. I'm learning, and I'm here to support you. Mary's smile was warm, her voice gentle. That's a start, Claire. Keep going. Claire nodded, her resolve strengthened, a small but vital step toward allyship. David continued, his words quotable and searing. Respect isn't a luxury, it's a right. We don't win by staying silent. We win by speaking up, by holding people accountable, by choosing compassion over cruelty. His voice rose, passionate. Miami, let's make this city a place where no one's judged by their skin, their clothes, or their dreams. The room erupted, cheers echoing off the walls. Rachel, clipboard in hand, beamed, her lawyer's precision now fueling community change. Howard Brooks, 50, sat quietly, his presence a nod to the dealership's ongoing reforms, his earlier apathy replaced by commitment. Outside, a group of young activists, inspired by the Thompsons, launched Miami United, a coalition to combat discrimination in local businesses. Their leader, Mia, 25, from the dealership crowd, spoke to a reporter, her voice fierce. The Thompsons and Sarah showed us what's possible. We're starting with workshops, petitions, anything to keep this going. Her partner, Jake, added, it's not just talk, it's action. Back at the event, John and Mary stood beside David, their hands still clasped. John's voice was soft, reflective. We wanted a car for our anniversary, but we got a movement. That's more than enough. Mary nodded, her eyes glistening. This is for every soul who's been told they don't belong. Lisa hugged them both, her voice warm. You've changed Miami, Mama Pops, and we're just getting started. As the event closed, the crowd spilled into the design district's neon-lit streets, their energy infectious. Phone shared David's speech, Sarah's story, and the Thompsons' legacy, each post a call to action. The story, born in a showroom, had become a beacon, urging Miami and beyond to confront racism with respect, courage, and unity.